I've got some new artwork that I am very excited to share with you guys. Hello, hello. I am Austin. Welcome to the Studio, and today we're going to be talking about character design. Longtime viewers may remember my pipe dream video game project, Everbound, which is like a whole fantasy world in a bottle for you to explore. I'm always chipping away at the world building. Even when I don't have time to work on the game itself, I'll write stories, build out the lore, anything to kind of keep myself engaged with this story. Today, we're going to be walking through the character design process, exemplified through my development of one of the fantasy races from the world of Relius, the Patsiki. The way I'm going to do this video is going to be a little bit freeform. I have the time-lapse of a couple of streams plus some off-stream work that I did developing this character, and I'm going to talk through my process and show you how I got to where I got. So from now on, I'll be down here in the corner. I tend to start how anyone does. I put down a head and then I draw kind of a general body line and just start building out these rough shapes. I know that I want him to be spindly. I know that I want him to be kind of like the Wendigo, which is like that deer monster from Native American folklore. So it's a bat, but it's very spindly, and it's this subterranean species that has climbed around on the walls for the majority of their existence. So while they do have wings, I actually forget to add those until later, but that's fine. We're not worried about that. I'll do that rough outline, get some general skeleton in place, and then with my next layer, I'll start putting in body mass. So I'll think about how the character moves, the way that their body interacts with their environment, and try to proportion them accordingly. These guys jump around on rock walls all the time, so I tried to go for some like pretty thick thighs, but skinnier as you get out into the ends, kind of like how a grasshopper looks, you know? And I did these hands here that get changed later. They didn't come out very nicely, but I do this template of the body that you can see as I start to apply clothing that makes it easy for me to think about where it's supposed to lay, and then I'll pop things on there, only when I need help with the proportions, but it is very helpful. I put on these bags because they're very like mechanically inclined species, always working and tinkering with things, so there are plenty of storage pouches just all over their bodies. That kind of got me in the rough place that I needed to go, but I was trying to figure out what was going on with the hips, and I ended up kind of deciding to go with these short shorts. That, kind of a unique choice for such like a monstrous looking creature, but I think it's working. You can see I forgot how to draw a braid, so I just did a vertical version so that I could get my brain around what the shape was before I started trying to map it onto the character itself. And that makes it a lot easier, and then I just slap a knot on there to tie those two together. These creatures are subterranean. They live in caves where there are vines all over the walls, so I decided to draw their clothes and the pouches and basically everything as though it was woven from that plant material. So as we move on into the line work, we take that rough sketch that I made and we commit to which of those lines we think actually tells the story correctly. I got a little bit ahead of myself here, and you can see I'm just trying to freehand the hands, and that did not work out. I ended up having to backpedal. I did a little more extra sketching, realized I was trying to put his thumb on backwards, and now we're in much better shape. So after I have that new sketch in place, I go back to my line work layer, start putting all that back in there, and it makes way more sense now. You can see the little balled fist with the index finger being what grows out into that whole long claw, and the other fingers kind of folded up next to it. The bags, I think, took even better shape after I started putting the line work on them. The ones up top were kind of just vague blobs that I think make a little more sense now. They don't need to be too detailed because this is just a rough character design. This first pass here was really just to get an idea of what the characters look like. So they're a subterranean species. I really wanted to show that with the big dark eyes and this kind of hunched posture that makes them look kind of shirking and maybe a little bit hostile but a little bit afraid. And I tried to get that mostly in the posture. As I mentioned, they're very industrious, so there's a lot of machinery and equipment that they're constantly working on, and they have those big long claws, but they can fold them back and use those smaller fingers that you can see off to the side to manipulate and work with things. So their other fingers are much more dexterous than ours are. It's kind of a reverse of how it works with humans, where these are the most important fingers for like doing things. With them, it's the rest of them. And the legs are technically a little bit of an anatomical anomaly here. There should be some more, either some more digits or some extra joints or something. They do look a little weird. I might make a tweak to that in the future, but honestly, I kind of like it. It makes them look a little bit more alien, so I'm into it. And then after I was done with the line work here, I moved on and just started doing a full color pass, not with any level of detail, but just to decide what my colors were going to be. Oh, look, I remembered wings. Yeah, I forgot to do the wings at first, so I popped those in there. Their wings are not vestigial, but it's not really the main way they get around. They'll climb around on the walls and then they'll glide. And I try to show that in the artwork by making them small relative to their body size. It's kind of clear with the way that their bodies are proportioned that they're not built around flight. Even though they're inspired by bats, they've got that big tuft of fur around their chest and the little ears and like, you know, the kind of snout and everything. They're bat-like, but they're not bats. Flying is not their primary mode of transportation. That's why they have all this musculature that you don't normally see in a bat's legs and arms. This is moving on to coloring in. As I mentioned, the clothing is all made of woven vines that are pulled off the sides of the caves, so just went with a pretty even green. And then after I had my base colors in for the whole body, I started popping in just a little bit of shading. And I think that gives you a good, like, finalized idea of what the shape and form is intended to be. You get a little bit of an idea of the tuftiness of the fur. You can see, you know, how curved that the musculature is in the back there, where we've got that big old caboose. And it sells it without committing too far. If you're doing a character design piece, perfectly reasonable to stop here. I elected to go a little bit further, did another stream where I walked through a more detailed rendering, which I left the same line work. I just went through and took a color palette, right, of everything that we had done so far with the artwork and got rid of my old coloring and started again from scratch. First thing I wanted to do was give a little more life to the eyes, so rather than them just being solid black, I went ahead and gave them a little more golden, kind of brownish light around the edges, like it's catching from the light. And then the shine on the eyes was made a little more soft, which makes it feel like it's penetrating through the eye a little bit more, adds depth and adds transparency to the look of the eye. So I copied that same move over on the other eye, stretching that in almost like the kinds of streaks that you see in an iris. I wanted to imply that, but I didn't want it to have like a full iris. I still liked the gaping eye effect that we were getting. So I wanted to imply more life and more anatomy to the eye without getting out of the way. And you can see how much that pops as soon as you put in the surrounding color. It kind of disappears into the white, but when you put on the surrounding color, that brown in the eyes just... So I was moving on to the rest of it and doing this kind of velvety texture that we have over his muzzle and around his face and on the neck, and this, you'll see it goes onto the arms and everything. And it looks nice. I like that velvety texture. I will say it ended up looking a little too leathery. I might go back and change that sometime, but for now we're sticking with it as it is. It does look pretty nice and velvety from a distance, so I'll accept that for the purposes of just designing the character. Moving on to the bags, you can see I was trying to really lean heavily into that woven look. So I did my rough texturing here, and then I took a very streaky brush to try to imply all of these woven fibers interlocking. And then I just take the pen tool to highlight a couple of them, give them a little more depth. So you do a light side and a dark side. In traditional art, you can double load a paintbrush and do that in a single stroke. And then after we're through with that, we moved on to just a quick little demonstration of the metal texture that goes on these little spikes on the end of their claws before hopping on to the more complicated fur texture. So this one is a little more interesting than what was going on with the rest of the body in that kind of velvety texture. This is a more clumpy, rough fur. I was not making my own brushes for this, so I was just kind of experimenting with what the tool had on hand. And I think I got something that looks nice and toony there. You'll see we come back a little bit later. After the stream was over, I decided to make that more of a long, streaky hair texture. We'll get into that in a minute. But then I threw down something quick for the claws. They're a pale yellow. Just kind of makes them white without making them white and disappearing into the background. So you'll see I move on and go ahead and start pushing these textures around to the rest of the character. But as we do, you'll see that I am making an effort to refine everything that we're working on. So it was around here that I noticed I wasn't exactly thrilled with the texture that I was using for the velvet. but decided rather than going all the way back, I would soldier forward, and maybe in a future redesign or refinement of this design, I might go ahead and do a custom brush, or at least just find a better brush that looks more velvety. It just looks a little too leathery. You can see it when it gets close. It's not quite right. It does do a good job though as we move through. It's nice for the edges of the shadows, like on the rib cage there. You can see it's nice for that stepped shadow. It blends with each other without like looking too soft or airbrushy or anything like that. It gives it enough texture that you can, like, in your head imagine the velvetiness. I think it gets it there. And the splotchy transitions, I think, also help with the velvet look. The whole process is just built around trying to tell the story of the character, right? We know what kind of species they are, we know where they developed, we know what their behavior is, so we try to show that, right? The fur maybe looks a little bit dirty towards the bottom, right? I kind of leaned, it's kind of rusty color for the most part, but down where it gets really shadowy, I went more toward brown, which I think gives it a little more of a grungy look. But here you can see this is where I went through and started streaking it out and making it look more like hair rather than fluff. And also just, it's a little less cartoony. Part of this was a result of the fact that the velvet texture just didn't quite have a vibe that matched the way that I had colored his hand earlier. So I'm trying to correct that by giving this a streakier texture. Now, I wasn't stoked with the transition from the velvet to the longer hair on top. Given another opportunity, I think I'd do a little more with that. What I'm trying to show is that it's like kind of slicked back from there, so it makes that transition really difficult. But I could have spent some more time on that, but I wanted to get the video out, you know what I mean? So we pushed through, and we're doing a more meticulous version of that shading that we did on the bag earlier. You can see I'm taking a brush that gives me a nice series of streaks and doing a sort of like really clean cross hatching, not making it muddy, trying to really follow the shape of the body. And that gets us most of the way there, but then I have to smooth it out with my blending brush to try to break up the hard cell shade lines that are left by the general shading pass. Then we throw those highlighted individual strands on there. Like I said, a light and a dark side, following the rules of the light direction, and that gives those just a little bit more life. And when you zoom out, the textures that are finer that would disappear, you still get that implication from the louder highlighted strands. Went ahead and threw the rest of the nail color onto the remaining claws. Threw that same color on the teeth. Filled in the wings. The wings were a piece of cake, honestly. I just smeared them and smudged them up. I didn't want them to look too veiny or anything like that. I didn't want them to draw too much attention, because they are not the loudest part of the figure, right? I wanted the muscles and the legs and all the pouches and everything to speak a little more loudly. So we popped it on a black background, and then nice little trick, oldest trick in the book, do a little mask, fill it in, you get some nice light shafts, and then you can pull some of it back with blending brushes, and there you go. That's a designed character. But that's it. Easy one this week. Just wanted to showcase a little bit of my character design process and talk about these creatures from Relius. If you're interested in all the different kinds of content we have at the studio, everything gets posted on the main channel, but we have these satellite channels so that you can check out any other content you want with a more specified feed. Art Studio for all of this kind of stuff. Play Studio for everything games related. Sweet E Studio is going to have some nail art content from Emily that I'm very excited to share with you guys. We got the podcast over on Yap Studio, and we've got the stream cut downs on Studio Offcuts, which you can also just go and join the stream yourself on Twitch if you're interested. So, with that, thanks so much for hanging out. It's been a blast, and I will see you next time.